Okay.
Great, thank you. Thank you for attending. This is Media Tips for Candidates. And I'm going to start by just explaining a little bit about this workshop. This came out of the Coordinated Campaign Committee's virtual campaign school. And we often do a campaign school which covers a full weekend, 2 or 3 or 2.5 days of different sessions. And we put this into 5 hours worth, because of the pandemic, we put it into a 5-hour slot of different videos and webinars on various aspects of running for office. So this was put into a little over an hour, and in a real campaign school, you'd have some of these sections divided into another, it would be its own section, like materials, hard copy materials, social media platforms would probably be a session of its own, and other kinds of media would be a session. But this is basically to give a really broad overview. Some of you are going to say, well, duh, we know this stuff, but some of the things may be different, a little bit different angle, and this will provide kind of an all-in-one inclusive space for all things media. So it won't touch anything extremely in depth, but what you can do is you'll have kind of an outline of what is generally what you should consider when you are running for office in terms of media. So I'll get started here, and I'd like to share the screen if that's possible. I guess I can do that. Okay, share a screen, and I want to do this. And oh, here we go. Okay, so hopefully I can continue to see this. It's not to work. Okay, so there's a ton of slides in here, and I did this just so I can get through them very quickly. And what I'll do, I think I'll stop after kind of each subsection, and people can ask questions. So basically, campaign media from our virtual campaign school. The original document was by Scott McClarty, the media director of the Green Party of the U.S., who left in, I think, 2018. The current, it's actually not media director, but communications director is Michael O'Neill. And so that would be the person manning the media stuff at the office. The general overview is I'm going to touch on a media coordinator. If you're running a campaign, an office you may want, media resources, online media resources, media releases and press conferences, and then general media tips. It was Marshall McLuhan. Some of you are old enough to know who that is, and if you're not, you should look him up because he was kind of an important cultural factor in this country's media concept culture. He said the medium is the message, and what that means is the medium that you're using to get your message across has a great deal to do with how it is perceived and how people understand it. Our content, we need to have policy, message, and goals in any kind of a content. The medium, then that's the message, content, content and goals. The media is what you produce, and media outlets, two different things. Usually we think of media outlets, as social media, TV, broadcast, whatever, but what you produce is also a form of media. And a lot of the idea about the medium is a message, creating materials that help exemplify what you want to get across is also an important concern. The strategy, it takes 7 hits. This is kind of a common media strategy. It takes 7 hits. Distribution, 7 hits for somebody to see a reminder that this candidate is running, or something about the candidate, to know that they're running and to get out and vote for them. They figure 7 hits, which means mail, radio, TV, brochures, whatever. So when you think about the 7 hits, you want to think about your distribution. What platforms are most effective? The frequency, which would be determined by how long of a campaign cycle you have, and how often, and then the distribution, what audience are you trying to reach, and then what coverage from what media outlet reaches what kind of distribution. You want to consider your materials and your target. And I'll start with the first most important, maybe not most important. You want to have some type of media coordination in your campaign, and especially for larger campaigns, if you're in a larger area or running for higher office, you'll want someone specifically dedicated as media coordinator. That person will oversee and coordinate the campaign media. One coordinator can also oversee more than one campaign. If you're running in say a large city and you have several people running for various offices, that person can help coordinate messaging, outreach, and other media efforts. You can get like a one-stop shop for a lot of different campaigns. That person will compile a list of local media resources and will develop media contacts. Aspects of this person, they need to be reliable, responsible, and available, because this is something that you need to have someone who is responsible to provide timely responses to media queries. They need to be available. They need to have the flexible enough schedule or be able to adapt, especially close to an election time. They're going to be called upon to manage a lot of stuff. They'll also guide supporters with letters to the editor, op-eds, rapid responses, question and answer, and news and opinion pieces. So someone who writes well, and I will personally say, in my opinion, someone who writes well is probably the priority. A lot of people want someone with graphics and other kinds of, social media skills, and that's important too. But the writing is really key. If someone doesn't have the social media skills, you can often find somebody who can use the writing to enhance what they are doing social media wise. The final thing that the media coordinator would do would be to plan media events. You look for and help create opportunities. I put in here, what would Susan B. Anthony do? Because she was famous for being probably one of the country's or maybe the world's first media hogs. Everything she did was done with getting media in mind. She was always, first thing would be call a lawyer or call the local press, call the local newspaper when she was arrested, so that she could get a lot of publicity. Second thing you want to talk about is consider as a media budget. You want to start thinking about who you want to reach, where they are, and how many people you need to reach. If you're in a tiny town or a rural community or a neighborhood, there you're going to do a lot more door-to-door, in-person campaigning. If you're in a larger city or covering like a federal area, you're going to probably want to invest in more broadcast media, more long-range, long-distance media, and you're going to want to raise more money because you're going to have to do more sending and more publicity in that regard. You want to think about what will be most effective in reaching your potential constituency. Again, with the larger campaigns or larger area, social media can be extremely important. In your neighborhood, not so much. You want to have it, but it's in person is going to be much more important. For constituency, you think of the target. Do you want a symbolic race, or are you organizing a campaign, or is it an area-wide campaign, or do you really want to win? If you want to win, you want a media that's going to reach out and speak to a large, broader segment of the population. If you're trying simply to organize a segment of that population for some reason, neighborhood group or some other constituency, then you may want to, direct your language specifically to them. I generally would recommend the broader language because it usually goes further, but that's something that would be affected by what kind of campaign you're running. Printed materials you're going to want to spend on. This will be brochures, leaflets and flyers, cards, signs, and pins. And then technology, because today you're going to need internet technology, web hosting and domain names you'll pay for, and other electronic media. So also media budget ads you want to consider will print and online media, broadcast, TV and radio, and social media. For social media, beware of policies and algorithms that will filter certain kinds of contents. People have run into Facebook issues, and some people spend a lot of money and sink all their money into Facebook and then find that their ads are blocked. Also be aware that other online media, TV and radio, still can be quite effective. For funding tips, don't just ask for funds and see how much you get, because a lot of people just starting out do that because they're reluctant to ask for funds. But you do first need to determine how much you'll need. You assess what you're going to buy, what you're going to need to spend to get X number of votes. So you determine how much you'll need to spend on various media, and do present these amounts and goals and fundraising appeals, because this tells supporters what you need and how they can help in a specific way. And you can do a great deal better fundraising if you go into it with that kind of approach. So for materials, I put here brochure. You want to have a front attracting notice, ensure enough space, color scheme, and it should be appealing to the eye. You want to include a nice photo of the candidate, brief introduction relevant to the constituency, maybe 3 to 5 policy points or goals, any endorsements, say a labor union or a neighborhood center or some other constituency, an organization, And then of course their contact info where you can find more information, their website, etc. And always include a tear-off portion to return for donations. You can also click volunteer, host a house party or coffee, or put up a sign, that sort of thing. So very quickly, here are some sample brochures. This is coronavirus. This is running to take over the world. I use that as an example of what I think is a nicely laid out brochure. It's pleasant to the eye, and you have a number of easily seen policy points. You see that this one I think is not as good. It's clear, but it's kind of busy. I have no idea who this guy is. I just picked these off the internet at random. But these are just kind of examples. More sample brochures. This is as a slate, which usually comes pretty well off. If you're, especially times we've done this with Green Party slates before. You've got your Green voters, and so they'll have the different photos and a little bit of it for the entire slate. That's also helpful. And more materials. You want things like leaflets, cowboy cards, door hangings, palm cards. These will use material from your brochure. You want to make sure always to include the contact information. You'll want yard and window signs. Consider whether you will need wires for those. You want flyers, quarter sheets. These may be most practical when public interaction is limited. If you're out anywhere and you can distribute anything, the brochure or a quarter sheet might actually be useful. Buttons, stickers, bumper and bike stickers, other kinds of materials. Oh yes, more business cards and campaign website that looks very professional. Banner, and you should invest in a small pin or badge with your name and what you're running for. Wear it everywhere. Here are sample yard signs. You can see who this person is and what they're running for. Some sample pins. And you're going to wonder why sample websites. Putting Texas first, this is not too bad. This looks good. You see the guy's name. This is a bad one because I can't tell who this guy is. I looked closely and couldn't find the guy's name. So you want to make sure that the name is prominent, what you're running for. And I think I get to this later, but there's a disclaimer issue that you need to put on your printed and hard concrete material. I'll get through these. Here. What materials are your materials made of? You want an eco-friendly source. Are they recyclable? Are they non-toxic? Now, you can't always manage all of this stuff, but something to think about. And again, this goes back to your budget planning. You want to know how much you're going to need, where it's going to be distributed, how you're going to get it out there. And then, are you going to have an eco-friendly source? Is it recyclable, non-toxic? Are you going to be able to say it's union printed, locally printed? All of these things you want to make sure to take into account. Union bug, and if you don't have a labor union, by the way, this is the case in my area. You can put labor donated if somebody is offered to make those, make the brochures, and locally made or local business. We had local businesses that's very supportive. They were, that's something you can show. Sometimes woman-owned business, Black-owned business. Those things are things you can consider adding if that's a possibility. Always include paid for by and the name of the campaign. Now, the name of the campaign is going to be something that you've gotten through the IRS as a tax, what's it? EIN, tax number, your business tax number. And you need to put on all of your material, I think pins are not, the tiny things are not required, but as a rule of thumb, paid for by name of campaign. And then depending on your state law, you may require the name of the treasurer, and always include the campaign headquarters address. Paid for by, Hoffman for Senate, P.O. Box, blah, 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 New Jersey, blah, blah, blah. Or paid for by supporter. Let's say I go out and I make a bunch of brochures for somebody. I can just say paid for by Holly Hart, and that's fine. But if your campaign is paid for, you must put paid for by the official campaign name. And I'm told that this must be in a box with a background with an offset color from the background from the rest of the printed material. And I've seen, just different colors. I mean, so it does hit the eye, but make sure not to forget that, because sometimes candidates are hit with this as an opponent might see this and think, gotcha, this is a violation. And you can actually be fined for that. So that's, yeah. So I'll stop here. Are there any questions about this area? Now, this is something that you would probably be dealing with in its own campaign school session, but are there any questions that might arise here? let's see. I'm not sure if I can see the chat or not. Anne, can you see the chat?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Cowboy cards?
You know, yeah, everybody asks this question. I have no idea. The cowboy cards are like a big oblong rectangle, and they're like, instead of landscape, they're more like portrait mode, but they're like a rectangle. I don't know why they call them cowboy cards. Some of them have door hangers, and we call those door hangers. And so I don't know why some are called cowboy cards. That's just what they call them. I don't know. But basically, I would say they're probably something like door hangers. And I think door hangers are definitely things to, and if I were going to invest in something like that, I would think the door hanger would be the better way to go in that. Good question. Anything else?
Someone wants to know where they can find virtual campaign school info.
Oh, okay. Go to gpus.org. And then you can go to, on the right-hand side, you'll see a bunch of committees, or actually on the top you see committees. No, I think it's right on the front. You go to committees and go to where it says Coordinated Campaign Committee. You click on that, and then the menu above Coordinated Campaign Committee will have webinars, and you click on that and you'll go down, you'll see all of the webinars and virtual campaign school. And most of them had videos, mine was not, and like I said, there's where I will put up the slide deck if people want, this can be kind of a reminder for people if they want to have the slide deck. So it's to gpus.org, Coordinated Campaign Committee, webinars.
And Caleb Winters said that cowboy cards are also called palm cards.
Okay, so that's interesting because that's not what we call them here, but you're right. Okay, so cowboy cards, my understanding is that they're larger. Palm cards are smaller. They're like business cards. They're just very small, but basically just very, very, again, same kind of stuff you'd have on a business card. They're good if you're going to say a club or a concert or something. You just want something small to hand out. Those are good. Those are good to have a set of those. So we'll have to track down and see what the heck. Sorry, but if there are no other questions, okay, I will go on. So traditional media, I say yes, really, because many people, especially younger people, say no, it doesn't matter. Well, yeah, it does. It goes further than you think. And I'll explain why in a minute. But traditional media is print. Yes, newspapers, yes, they're dying breed, but newspapers definitely, especially those that are still around, can be very important. Sometimes even the ones that are, many are corporate owned and nationally owned, but even local, they'll have some local content. That's dwindling, but it's important to know about. The major news wires like Associated Press, Reuters, UPI, they have stringers. They pick up information, they pick up events, they can pick up news about candidates, and you may want to distribute your press releases and other things to major news wires, again, AP, UPI, and Reuters, among others. And that would be also things like, I think, Al Jazeera and Deutsche Welle and some of these other things if you happen to have access to those. Also, some print media, daily, bi-weekly, weekly, monthly. A lot of places have a little weekly or bi-weekly newspaper, monthly paper. And sometimes those are even better because they often like to have more local content and will sometimes have the kind of reporters that are really friendly to different kinds of candidates and friendly to progressive issues. For radio, you have local commercial radio, which you can purchase commercial content on. Public radio and community radio, you cannot buy commercials, but you can't, well, you can't, forget it. You can do underwriting, but that they usually don't take political ads. However, there are some access, there are access possibilities with public and community radio, TV, and TV outside of buying ads. Television, of course, you've got broadcast television, and then of course there's cable and public access. And for cable, that's also kind of dying at this point, but if people have cable, you can sometimes find a channel like the Weather Channel or the Women's Channel, and they'll offer, you can do some campaign ad, like a crawl like the Weather Channel, and people are looking at the weather and you got your campaign info with a crawl across the bottom of the screen. That used to be possible. I don't know how possible it is today, and maybe this is not worth looking into today as opposed to other things, but you can always check with your local cable and public access channels and see what kinds of ad possibilities they offer. Traditional resources, be aware of how journalists and reporters see the news, which is not necessarily what we see the news as our news is most important, but they're looking at, like, for a campaign, who's going to win, what are the real issues. They don't care so much about your personal background. That they might if it's, you know, unique or something, but basically keep in mind what they're looking for. They're looking for news that they see as relevant to the entire community and to that topic. Be aware of what you say and how they may be interpreted. Even friendly media sometimes will pick up on something that you didn't quite intend to come out the way that it was said. Always be very careful, but don't be afraid to approach media that might not support your views. I have found myself sometimes contacted by media that from a conservative radio station or something, but they believe that everybody should be heard. There are still those out there. So in some cases, they may be interested in giving people a fair representation or fair chance to be heard. So, but I say, but in tiny print, see above. Be aware of what you say and how it could be interpreted. You know, we just had a guy who was talking about the spoiler issue and how he thought it was a great idea to aim to spoil elections. And several people tried to jump on him, you know, and say, well, you got to be a little bit nuanced about how you say that and to whom, because some people will take that and run with it and beat the bejeebers out of your campaign. Community and other local radio and public access TV may have production facilities you may use. That's something not a lot of people know about, but public stations I worked at, it was not uncommon for a national candidate to come through and they would just ask to use the production studio for an hour or two. And public access TV, of course, often they have studios. So that's something, if you wanted to produce a nice video or radio content, you could check into that. Public stations are required to offer brief announcements on request. Now, you can check with the local public radio station. There is a formula for content. What it is you can request, it's 1 minute of an announcement about your candidacy. They usually run it like at midnight or 2 a.m. But a lot of people don't know about this. It's something that's free. You cannot purchase commercial content, and they probably will not take. In fact, there are strict rules about underwriting, so you don't have that option. But you do have the option to request. You can contact your local public radio, and they should know this. You can also contact the FEC would have, or the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, would have information about that. More traditional resources, ads. You want to, thinking of ads, if you can invest in some audience research. A lot of the research companies talk about segmentation, scope, day part. Segmentation is, you know, how are you going to distribute to what constituency, how broad, and day part refers to broadcast media. Oftentimes you're purchasing ads and they cost more if they're in what they call drive time. If it's in, you know, people are driving to work and driving from home, if it's radio, or it may be later than that if it's TV. So day part can affect the expense, but also a little more expensive is sometimes better heard or seen. You also need to know what is the current fair use policy. What that means is if you're a candidate running for office and you're interviewed, or you do something like chain yourself to a pipeline and you're part of the news, then that's fair. They can include that on broadcast media. If you have a show on broadcast media, at that point, that is considered unfair exposure or privileged exposure, and any candidate running for the same office may request equal time. And that is why you sometimes hear of people like Pat LaMarche being fired from her job as a radio host during the time she was running for vice president, because the stations don't necessarily want to add to have anybody running for vice president, you know, stop in and say, okay, I want to be on the air for 5 hours a day. What they generally do is give them a market share, so you're on for an hour, but at a peak time. Stations don't like to do that either. But fair use policy does mean if you're running for someone and they have, you know, they're like the local talk show, shock jock host, you can approach the station and remind them of that and ask for some kind of fair trade for your own campaign. Some people think that law has expired, but last I checked, it was still in use. And again, coverage is part of the news or an interview versus exposure is some other media function. If you work in the media, know the law. It's not unusual to be fired or asked to step down during a campaign. Just be aware of that. Some people are like, Chris Hedges just got hit with this. You know, he was going to run and then found out because of his job at RT that was going to affect how they could present him. Any questions about this before I go further?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. There are more comments than questions.
Okay.
Just a note that Jesse Ventura, that might have been why he didn't want to go for the Green nomination, because he has a show on RT.
Interesting. Yeah. That's an interesting comment. That could have been. I know he talked about his wife being ill, but yeah, that would be another consideration. And I think I heard him say he'd have to step down from that. You don't have to fire the person, but they would have to be off the air. And so if that's their income, that's an issue.
I have a note from Dave on the GPUS merchandise committee to remind everyone to check out the shirts and hoodies and stuff. This is all in chat. I'm just going to read the ones that are questions.
Okay.
You know, everyone else can read the other stuff.
Okay.
Nick said he had a talk show on public access with a candidate, and they did allow, while he was a candidate, and they did allow him to stay on. So it may be like a regional thing too, depending on what.
It's not illegal for them to do it. It's just that the issue is that if somebody else running for the office comes and says, I want time, they have to give it to them. I had the same thing. I was a lieutenant governor candidate years ago, and they let me stay on because they figured, you know, nobody was going to ask for that kind of on a classical music station. But you're right. It's not a legal issue. It's just that a lot of stations fear having to open up, you know, their drive time to some to anyone who wants to come in. So any other chat? I'm not sure I can see the chat. That's
I'm just going to read any questions about the content rather than just comments.
Only say the nice ones. Is there anything else, or I can go on?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, so online media, which of course, and especially now, is becoming more important. And as I said, if you're running in a race that's covering a lot broader geographic area and or population, then online media is going to be an important tool to reach more people. Local news outlets usually have an online presence, your daily newspaper or other online news sources such as blogs or Patch. Patch is one that I've also been, I had no idea it was still around, but I'd see an article about it. It's on Patch or blogs. And your media coordinator ought to have a list. And one thing, you might get a media list that's all the standard media, but sometimes you can use your campaign volunteers and supporters to find other online sources such as, you know, Patch, local blogs. In mine, there's one called Bleeding Heartland, and you know, they can become kind of influencers. So it's good to have a list of those, and they're often fun to interact with. For a website, you'll want a website manager or somebody who knows what the heck they're doing. Bluehost and GoDaddy are some inexpensive providers. I've used Bluehost. A lot of people use GoDaddy, and they're easy to set up. Make sure you add a donate button to any website that you have. It's easy to have a PayPal donate button or something. Make sure that's set up. Content management CRM. That would be like when people sign up, and it feeds sign up information into a database. So you get the name, whether they want to volunteer, you know, contact info if there's a donation, that sort of thing. You want to make sure that that's part of it. Now, I'm not actually familiar with campaign websites that are able to do that. The things I worked for have been a lot less fancy, but definitely if you can go with it. And today it becomes more and more easy to do that, especially with Bluehost. It's definitely worth including. Also, you want to have like PDF files, a downloadable brochure, leaflets and flyers, policy points, papers. That's always useful to do. For social media, one thing that we found on the coordinated campaign committee, create a share team. Know the rules about the social media. Share team would be people to help share things on Facebook, not just like, but share to their friends or share to other Facebook groups and pages, and Twitter retweet, and anything else like Instagram or some of the other social media. Be aware of algorithms and built-in bias, which does hurt us. We don't know what the algorithms are. We don't know exactly what they do, but what I do know is that if you happen to post something that gets a lot of hits, the next time you post, Facebook, I'm talking Facebook only, Facebook interprets your success as how far you come to that high mark. So let's say you have a real big hit, but then after that, it's just business as usual. But that starts to get buried in relation to what impact you already had. So it's difficult to figure out actually. So having a share team is a real benefit, because those people then will see from your Facebook site. You want to have a Facebook page. Those people can help promote that to their constituencies. And if you have people in various organizations that are supporting you, or people who have connections, they can post your post share their post on their Facebook pages, and of course retweet. But that's really a smarter way of trying to get them out. Ads are fine, but you need to realize that political ads, the rules are changing constantly. And so sometimes it's not good to sink a lot of money. We had a candidate that put all his money into Facebook ads and didn't even make the ballot. They just blocked every last one of them. And there was, so it was kind of sad. You do want to use Facebook, the page. You want to have a page, have an events. You can have videos and invitations, and you can post your videos, and you can have watch parties and live stream events. So that's always something to use. Twitter, Instagram, MeWe, Discord, whatever. And you can also make a coordinator for one or more. And sometimes it's good to have someone behind each account, because nothing better than to have, or nothing worse than to have, 15 different accounts, and then the person leaves and there are just these accounts with nobody behind them. So you want to have a coordinator to make sure that you have saved the login and the password information, which many people often fail to do. So you want to be able to shut them down when you're done with them, or keep using them when you do want to use them. Also consider streaming media and applications, Pandora, the Weather Channel. If you listen to some of these, you'll sometimes hear stop with they'll have a commercial break for those of us who don't pay to not have the commercials. So you can buy commercials on these platforms. I think Spotify may be another, but I know Pandora and Weather Channel for sure. So that's something you might consider. I know I'm in Iowa, and I heard a lot of presidential campaign spots on some of these. So it might be something worth, they obviously figure that somebody's listening.
There's a note here from Mike that organic content is better than paid ads on social media.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Okay, thanks for letting me know. Yeah. Also, sometimes sharing events or sharing to another page isn't from another Facebook also isn't so good. Yeah, organic content is good, and if you find somebody who likes to do graphic work and meme work and that kind of thing, that can be helpful too. More helpful strategy, you want to put the candidate's name on Google Alerts. In other words, you have a Google Gmail account, and you just sign up with google.com alerts, and you can respond online to articles and blogs as soon as they get published. So in other words, each day you get a list of Google alerts, and that candidate, there's going to be something about that candidate there, and you can go to that media outlet. You can offer good information about your candidate before others post their responses. And so in other words, your candidate was accused of graft or corruption, and you can write in and say, no, here's the real facts, or something like that. Or there's some article, and you can add a bit of information about that. Again, great volunteer opportunity. Be part of a Facebook share team, Twitter brigade, rapid response team, and you have new volunteers coming in that want to help. This is a great and easy way and helpful and an important way to get people involved. And it's easy. Especially they don't have to go outside in this day and age. You can assign a general coordinator or coordinator for each platform. Again, just make sure that you have the information so people can actually remember what you'll have. The campaign will have the login and all the information they need to access it, so you don't end up with a dead campaign account that gets taken over by a porn company. The next time somebody clicks on it, you get a little surprise. I put in search engine optimization, SEO. That's something that if you were running for Congress and running a higher level campaign, you might want to look at. There are a number of agencies out there that offer this. That's how to make your campaign come up at the top of the search engine. I honestly can't say I haven't looked into this much. It's not something I'm familiar with, but again, if you're running for Senate and you're really serious, that's something you definitely may want to think about. I think personally, I think you're better off with your share team, Twitter brigade, and rapid response team, and focusing on your local or regional media. And you have individuals who are able to check out, monitor the media, and respond.
A question from Madeline Hoffman. What do you do if your website doesn't show up at all? I don't know if that means that it got taken over and removed, or how that works. Maybe we can talk about that more during the question and answer at
I
the
think
end.
so. Yeah, I think she might be talking about what if it doesn't show up during a search. Well, what you do is get a bunch of your friends to click on it, go to it, assuming the link works, because it's based on how much people are looking at it.
Yeah, she's saying in a Google search, it doesn't show up at all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's a problem. Now I'll get to this also. There's also Google AdWords and Google Ads. There's another thing to look into, and I don't know what the options are for campaigns, but definitely something to work on. But one thing you can do is simply get people to click on your website.
And there's a note here from Clay that the page properties need to be edited. Maybe that's something we can.
Okay, yeah, we might
hear
have
about at the end. Yeah.
I'm not familiar with it. Yeah. So anything else on online media, but I'll go into the press release, which is what people mostly think of in terms of media at this point. But if nothing else, press release things to keep in mind. We have a sample template for press release. Basically, what you want to keep in mind is the topic is the candidate. You always want to have the candidate's name in the email subject line, heading, and first line of the first paragraph, so people don't forget it. Remember the 7 hits rule. The more you repeat something, the more the person sees it and hears it, then they're going to be more apt to take some kind of action, hopefully positive. You want to include the candidate's name, the office SOC, location, contact information, and website. You want to make sure they're at the top of every release, not as in the body of the message, but just as kind of a template, so that the people who are looking in the press who are looking will get all that information in one glance. The campaign media director's name, phone number, and email address should also be used as a contact. Quite frequently, especially close to the election day, the candidate's out talking. They don't have time to be, following every little media inquiry. And so that's what the media director is there for. It's good to have at least one good quote per release. Hopefully from the candidate or consultants can and staff can help, supporters can help craft campaign quotes about whatever issue it is that they're addressing. You also want to use a press release to demonstrate how the candidate stands out and what they offer. Not about an issue, it's what the candidate will do about it. So the difference would be like, griping about the garbage collection policy in Iowa City, blah, 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 blah. It sucks. There are raccoons that are taking over the neighborhoods. But you want to make sure that, the candidate has a plan to deal with it and what that is. And that's actually more important than just griping about it. A lot of times people just start out because they have a concern about an issue, but they talk more about the issue than the solution. So keep the solutions in mind. The template, again, you got the campaign name, campaign website for immediate release or embargoed on until date. If something major is going to happen and you're going to, you don't want them to put this out too soon, you can put an embargoed until this date. That's probably not going to be common in most campaigns, but just to be aware of. Then you put the date it's going to be released. You have your contact for media coordinator. Then you have the text itself. And then at the bottom for more information, and then you repeat, contact info, website, email, phone. You've put it up at the top as well, but repeating doesn't hurt. The press release for a campaign, you want to put out 1 or 2 per week. Avoid sending on weekends or Fridays. It's generally a slow news day. I've heard that Tuesdays are a good day to go out. Sometimes I've seen things go out Sunday night, so it's in the inbox Monday morning. But Fridays or a weekend generally are slow unless something major happens. Otherwise, keep them early in the week. You want to distribute to both major and niche media, major print, radio, and TV, local weeklies, online sites, community media. The whole list, you can blanket wherever you can send. Follow-up calls to media contacts are helpful. You have another thing volunteers can do. They call the contacts. Did they receive the press release? When are they planning to publish it? That's a passive-aggressive way of saying publish it. And are they interested in an interview? And that can be extremely helpful. For more effective press release, you can also send out or include a video news release, which is called a VNR, with a video clip of the candidate speaking. Now, of course, as it's to a newspaper, even to online newspapers now, they often do use video. So if you've got a video, you can also offer a video interview, but sometimes those video clips can be quite helpful. And earned media is something that is newsworthy activity or an event. Think like a journalist. What would be interesting and relevant? And I'm not encouraging people to go out and do crazy things like set themselves on fire or chain themselves to the courthouse, but it's that, sometimes civil disobedience, sometimes speaking in front of a historic landmark that's controversial, sometimes being able to participate in a certain kind of event. What would be newsworthy to not just Greens, but to the journalist, to a reporter, someone who's bored, I'm looking for something interested to cover, and oh, this looks interesting. You can also pitch stories. You call on editors and reporters to offer ideas. This is something that the media coordinator should direct, but volunteers could help with as well. Call on editors and reporters, offer ideas. For instance, a pandemic. What policy will this candidate bring to bear? How is the campaign and constituency affected? So, you've got, Medicare for all or improved Medicare for all. Here's why you think it's a good time to bring this, and your candidate has a unique perspective on this, and that's something that helps them actually get a grasp of where you're coming from, and that's going to interest them a lot more than just saying, oh, we got this great candidate. We have a candidate that's going to address the pandemic. We have a candidate that's going to address public transit, Relationship with media contacts can result in prompt interest and coverage. A lot of time media coordinators that do this for quite a while will have their friends in the media or their friends at the local TV station or radio station or newspaper, and they'll chat just every so often, and then when these people are contacted, it's a name they recognize. They think, oh, this person's a responsible media person, and they're interested in what we have to say. I found that sometimes local media are interested in third parties and the Green Party. We've been asked to make sure that we're keeping them on their distribution list. So if you have a contact with somebody, always make sure to keep them apprised of with the distribution, with your press release distribution, but also just you touch base every so often. So any question about the press releases themselves? Comments?
Nothing in chat.
Okay. So the press conference is a little different. That's press conference is when you call a conference where you're hoping media will show up and you're going to make an announcement or something. And the media alert follows a similar template. You've got the same contact info in there, but you wanted to say what, where, when, why. We're going to do, this is what's going to happen, when, where, and why are we doing it? It's important news or announcements like a campaign kickoff, vice presidential candidate selection, lieutenant governor selection, something like that. Important news or announcements. It will offer an action or a statement. There will be something important, followed by media question and answer. So consider want someone to moderate that. And then you want to consider the location. For example, a campaign kickoff can be at maybe the Dakota Access Pipeline, melting nuclear reactor. I probably not doing that because that could be dangerous, but housing slum area, or it could be like a community garden, urban garden, something like that. So you want to consider your location. You want to make sure the media is given plenty of lead time. If you write them a month in advance, they're probably going to forget about it. But if you contact them the week of, most media sit down, they plan their workout, at the beginning of the week. So you want to give them like either lead time early in the week. Follow up with media contacts, just as we mentioned before, something volunteers can do. And then you can also offer to give them arrange interviews to the press afterwards, one-on-one interviews. And so normally, they show up, they hear the statement, they have questions, answers, and then if they're interested, they'll approach the candidate and set up a one-on-one interview.
There's a comment from Peggy that if the media doesn't get to the event, she sends them the press release again with a synopsis and a 20-second video that they can use, or even still photos work.
Great, thank you. That was kind of coming up a little bit further down, except Peggy adds an extra twist in there that if they don't show up, you send them the follow-up anyway, or resend them that reminder anyway. That's a good idea. For the press conferences, you want to have a press kit for reporters. That will include the media alert, and then also a hard copy. You want to have a hard copy and online probably today on your website. This will be the introduction and main campaign points, same stuff you have in your brochure, the main goals and issues. You might want to have samples of the person's work if they've written an op-ed, say, or we'll have sample press releases in the Green Party press kit, but you might have the person wrote a letter or an op-ed or an article or something. You might want to print one or two of those, and of course, contact information. You also want to record the press conference today. You want to get someone with a decent, I mean, you can do this on a phone camera and actually come off pretty good pretty good recording. So you can record the press conference. You can use the shortcut of that for a website and social media video. You can also live stream if you want, but you can also keep that content and make edits for social media and your own website. It's also useful to review for future improvement. Like today, I've had like 7 hours straight of these conferences, so you can hear that I'm kind of tired. So I can look and say, okay, here's what I should not do. Here's where I should look at the camera. The lighting could be better, that sort of thing. One more time here, okay. From coverage, when you do get press coverage, getting mileage from that, press clippings. In the olden days, of course, it was having somebody, and you actually had a clipping service where they would go and track anything written about the candidate, and they would clip it out and send it to you. You can have, your media coordinator and volunteers make sure that any, a printed press is clipped. But also, of course, now it's online and social media. You want to collect positive coverage, post on campaign websites, social media, and send to supporters. So you want to get URLs of say, the video or an interview and that sort of thing. So you want to make sure you keep track of those clippings. This can also, again, include the positive content on your campaign material. If you had like an interview on Jimmy Dore or something, Bill Moyers or something, you could include that on your website, and you can include mention of it or a couple quotes, a quote or something from that on a brochure or printed material. You want to make sure to archive all press releases, letters, op-eds on your campaign website and social media. Social media it may be okay, but definitely archive every little teeny tiny thing that has to do with the campaign on your website somewhere. Another thing, virtual town halls, meet and greets, and Facebook watch parties are other opportunities people can use. I say see video production, and that's because in the virtual campaign school, we did have an actual session on video production, which we don't here. I'll just talk very briefly about it because that's a whole nother can of worms by itself. But a lot of people are doing the Facebook watch parties, meet and greets, and virtual town halls. And that's something you can look into further. I think Facebook offers those, and I think they're fairly easy to set up. You can do them via Zoom and broadcast on Facebook as well. You want to present the message. You want to rehearse, be aware of the background lighting, camera angle, and question, and how to do question and answer, which we're getting a lot of experience with, practice with this time. But it's experienced video people can tell you very, how to do good lighting, how to put your, where to situate yourself in the camera, in front of the camera, and how to not do like all kinds of stupid things with your hands and that sort of thing. So anything on media coverage then for this?
No questions here.
Okay. Ad advice. One, when you think of going for ads, you may want to approach organizations that host forums, League of Women Voters and Sierra Club. Labor organizations will host candidate forums, education organizations. So you may want to actually reach out to them. For buying ads, again, a streaming media like Pandora or Spotify, and Google Ads and AdWords. Now, I have to admit, I am not real familiar with these. I've used them. I've looked into it for a nonprofit that I worked for, but I would recommend that a campaign have someone do a little research. There will be legal issues as to what you can and cannot do with them, but I think if it's a possibility, so many people use Google and Gmail, and having those little ads pop up, can after 500 of those things, you start to remember. So I think it's worth looking into. For commercial broadcast versus public, again, commercial can take paid ads, and a local radio station may well be, or a local TV station may well be worth it. Radio is a lot cheaper, although for many of us it's still expensive, but it's something to be well aware of, especially if you're really running to win. You want to reach as many people as possible, and so that may have a larger reach. Underwriting campaign ads are not possible. I was thinking about United Way. No. So for public and community stations, they do underwriting, but that is not, they can't take that kind of content. You could do something like saying, I'm Ann Link running for city council of blah, 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 urging you to get out and vote on election day. But many stations will back off from that too, because that's close to campaigning, and they can be very strict. And they do, in fact, you can get a fine. I just heard of a very tiny station getting a $15,000 fine for underwriting that actually told people to do, that said, you can, you know, they were comparing and talking about something being the best in town, all of this stuff there, and they are really strict about it. So for the non-commercial stations, the best bet is to ask them about the fair use policy and to ask them about their the option of that the candidate, what is it, I forget what the word was, but it's a minute announcement, candidate announcement. And if they don't know what it is, you can contact the FCC and explain it to them.
Holly, Chris had his hand up. He's got a note here. I'm just going to unmute him. Do you want to have questions at the end or answer this?
Well, let's go ahead now.
Okay.
Might as well. There's not that much more of it. We're getting close to the end anyway, so.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, very good. Yeah. I ran in the 7th District of California for Congress, and I had arranged with the League of Women Voters to do a debate between the 5 of us running, and the incumbent couldn't be there because he was busy impeaching Trump at the time, and then turned around and gave him $131 billion for invading Iran. But anyway, I contacted the newspapers, and all the newspaper wanted to know is, oh, would the incumbent be there? And I said he was, invited, but he declined. And he says, oh, well, we're not interested then. Also, I did a half an hour, interview with one of the local channels, the broadcast channel, and they used 12 seconds of it. Now, the incumbent got a half an hour before our, the display of the different candidates, and the other Democrat and the 2 Republicans got much better time than I did. And I got like zilch, 12 seconds. That was it. And then when I called the station and said, well, can I have my half-hour interview and that I can use? And they said, no, we don't allow that.
That's too bad.
So it's a big bias going on, and it really is slanted towards the incumbent very badly.
Chris, can I ask a question? Where did you say you were in California?
7th District. That's up in Sacramento.
Okay. One thing, you could be right. This depends on where you are and what media you're dealing with. And it is true. Some people face really hostile media or just not very professional,
right?
Even when they're professional.
Well, and it was just really frustrating that they are working so hard to limit the discussion. And I did get a very nice article out of the the Elk Grove Citizen, and that was good. So that was somebody I could talk to. But it's just, you really have to search around in order to find anybody who's going to give you any kind of time. And,
well, that's why sometimes the alternative, or like the weeklies or the smaller papers or smaller stations, might be more interested. They're looking for, they might be more friendly, not always. But the other thing too, another thing that
but they, the major newspaper in this area is the Sacramento Bee, and they just blocked me to heck. I was like, wasn't even of any interest to them.
The other thing, well, and another thing could be, again, the larger areas, it's who's most important, or who's the incumbent. That does have, and also it depends on the political climate too. In some cases, if you have I'm in a battleground state, and so we get much less coverage for top ticket candidates. If you're in a state that's a one-party state, they may be more interested just because you're something different. But it is true, and especially now you're in this, the state capital, you know, that it is true that sometimes some people have to work a lot harder to get decent media than others. And again, it depends on the situation where you're at. But I would recommend take advantage of any of the quote unquote alternative, you know, the local.
So I did say that we had set up this debate with the League of Women Voters, and they had said that they would have streaming services for the broadcast, and it turns out they didn't. But I happen to have a camera, so I was able to capture the debate, and we did a production on it and turned it over to the League of Women Voters, and also I put it up on my website. So
good. Yeah, it's
up on YouTube. So
yeah, it's always good to have someone with a camera, like you just said too. When you're doing a media event or any kind of event, if you have someone who can record it, and sometimes the local PATV will offer recording, filming services and equipment.
Don't always assume that they're going to take care of you.
Right, exactly, and then you can use that.
It doesn't always happen.
I'll finish this. I think there's not much more to go on, but just a few more notes. I did want to address video. In the campaign school, we had a whole session on this because they talk about what kinds of platform and equipment. Platform means the technology. You know, we see Zoom for these that have worked okay, but they're fancier. They generally are more expensive, actually. Can be quite expensive, but they look really spiffy and great lighting and sound and everything. So if you really wanted to invest in a good video, you could familiarize yourself with this. There's also relatively inexpensive equipment, lighting, mic stuff. Some of you probably have, the headset and the mic, and they're not that expensive. And if you're going to do a lot of video, it's worth investing a little campaign money in. You want something to be well lit, avoid light behind or directly facing you so you don't look like you're either a silhouette or blasted out. You see those film umbrellas, sometimes you see shots of people filming and you see little umbrellas that are like the photograph umbrellas. Some people really get fancy and use those. I've seen pretty good lighting without that, but that's something you can think about. Make sure that you have a level headshot, not too close, not too far away, enough above the bottom third, which is like the bottom third of the video, in case you want to use subtitles, closed captioning, translation, crawl, campaign info and all that stuff, so you want to keep the head a little bit above, kind of maybe where I am now. You don't want to cut the head off, but if you're down here, then you see it gets cut off. So that's one thing to keep. And then the sound quality, especially if you're on the radio, keep your face toward the mic. Don't bump the table, don't bump the desk area, and don't fade. And what I mean by that is a lot of people, actually guests are usually okay about this. Sometimes hosts that are not very experienced will do this. They look away from the mic and they're looking over here, or they're looking over here, and then they might fade away. So you want to keep an even tone. You want to keep facing the mic, and be aware that when you bump anything on the table, it's probably going to pick up on the mic as well. Now that's for probably like the kind of community station that I'm involved with, which will have the mic's very sensitive, and you don't necessarily have a boom mic, so you just be aware of the fact that the sound is going to be traveling more than you think, but you also want to keep it even. More tips: earned media. Again, I mentioned major news wires. Some of the smaller outlets sometimes have more interest. Relevance and timing. Keep in mind that most reporters get 50 to 100 pitches per week. I don't know I know Ann supplied that from the older media tips, and I'm not sure if that has to do with the market area or not, but just keep in mind that you're in competition with a lot of other stuff going on. Things that might be of interest: if it's a contested and uncontested race, if you're running as an uncontested race, that's actually great for you. The media may be less interested in that, although you can sell it as something unique, or you're going to address something in a certain way, or you have this kind of new policy or something. But a contested race can work in your favor if it's a hot contest and you're one of the hot contestants. It can also work against you if you're not one of the hot contestants. If it's a major party race, top ticket, you may tend to get ignored more. Friendly races are races where the candidates are friendly toward each other, and the media would be friendly toward you. And then there are things like sacrificial lamb races. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but that's basically when you've got like an incumbent that's so popular, like Charles Grassley, our senator from Iowa, who, you know, is never going to die, and he'll keep getting elected until he's 150 years old. And the Democrats never want to put anybody up against him. So the Democrat is called a sacrificial lamb. They have to put up somebody, and it's some guy that last put up was, it's kind of sad. He was actually dying. But he, you know, didn't even campaign much. What was great though, is that we as Greens could put up a candidate. If you see something like that, you can jump on it, and you can actually be a little bit of a new and interesting item, because the media will think, okay, fine, this guy's going to win. This guy's not going to win. Oh, well, wait, here's this Green candidate that is, you know, a little bit unusual. So you have to know kind of how to work the situation. You know, if they're going to ignore you, if they're going to, you know, how can you keep them from ignoring you, I guess is the best way of putting it. One other thing, be aware of unintended messaging. Watch out for alienation. A lot of times people use jargon. They tend to want to narrow a message and focus on a constituency, which is not bad, but there have been a lot of PR disasters where people use language and messaging that was meant to flatter a particular group, and that's often read or heard by every other group, including and the group you're trying to flatter, as being unflattering to everybody else. There was a major radio mess it was like in the early 80s, and it was a corollary to the PBS Newton's Apple, and there was a message called, it was for radio for people who think, public radio. And when we were doing pledge drives, we say radio for people who think, and I had an odd feeling about it, but we started hearing calls from people saying, well, that's kind of rude. You think everybody who doesn't listen is stupid? And it was so bad, they yanked that, so you won't see it around today. But, you know, that was meant to flatter the audience, but be careful of that. You want to be inclusive. You don't want to say things that people will exclude. And also for theater, you know, we've had people who are comedians, or they're stand-up comic, or they're sarcastic, and they can be really funny. But when you run for office, you're a straight person. Straight man is what they call them, but a straight person. People want a serious candidate, and you can use humor, but if you act like a stand-up comic, they will take you as a stand-up comic. One example I'll use is somebody who did work successfully, whether you entirely agree with his history and politics or not, but Al Franken of Minnesota, who was on Saturday Night Live, and he is funny. When he ran for office, he did have some humorous bits, but he was a serious campaigner. You know, it was a different persona that he showed. And you do need to realize, you know, you're not going to get tons of votes because you're a good comic. You can use and you got to watch sarcasm. You don't want to come out as mean and mean-spirited and stuff. So you can use it, but you need to be this, like I said, the straight person in this. And I see I repeated myself here. So yet more tips. This is something that when I put this up, you might want to look on the Coordinated Campaign Committee page of gpus.org and look under the webinars and look for the slide deck, because these are some useful things. Vote USA, vote-usa.org, Project Vote Smart. Your campaign can be listed on the Green Party's candidate page. These are places where you can get a teeny tiny bit of exposure, but if anybody was looking, and there's where you get your search engine. If somebody's doing research, they'll find your campaign. Put the candidate's name on Google Alerts. We just mentioned this before. See, I have to edit this. And then remember that politics is theater. I just said don't be a stand-up comic, but look for theatrical events, public occasions, rallies, demos that help define your campaign. If you're a white candidate, you don't necessarily want to co-opt a Black Lives Matter rally, but you could be there to hand out your palm cards or brochure. And if they offer a space, you know, for it to speak, that's a great opportunity. You know, you can do something imaginative and create your own media events. This is from Scott McClarty in Washington, D.C. The party there responded to the Post's refusal to cover the local candidates by holding their own press conference at the sidewalk in front of the Post's front door. One D.C. candidate, Adam Eidinger, suspended a giant banner from the overpass to local freeways. So those are kind of things that, again, they are funny, and when seen as creative and from the underdog, those do come across well.
Polly, there's a question. Is there a way we can send people the slide deck?
Yes, you know, if people want to just send, I know this is kind of quirky, but if people want to just give me their emails, I'll just email you the thing.
You mean in the chat?
Yeah, yeah. Or they can also, you can put my email in the chat room too.
Okay. Just
Gmail.com,
remind
yeah.
me, Holly. I'm going to type it right now.
Okay. Or
Wait.
just media@gp.org. I can get that too. Yeah, media@gp.org. Or yeah, yeah.
What is it?
Oh, we want media@gp.org.
Is that where you want it to
Oh,
come?
you know, well, you can put there or put hart11@gmail.com.
You know what? This might go up on the website. I don't know how to do this. Do you want your personal
Okay,
email?
yeah, just put media@gp.org. That's probably better. Media@gp.org. That's MEDIA, not MEDEA.
Oops, I left something out. Sorry.
Yeah, because I think especially at the end, some of these Green Party media resources, that's the Media Committee of the Green Party. The National Media Committee can answer questions and provide more help for green campaigns. We also have an audio video subcommittee. I will edit this right here. And we can provide help for Greens preparing video and broadcast over the airwaves, cable, and internet radio ads. And we can, in fact, for some of our press conferences, I think some of the candidates appreciated kind of the critique we gave them about how to stand and how to present and hone their presentations. And also the Coordinated Campaign Committee helps with running all candidates, all campaigns except president. They do everything else. They have a lot of resources, webinars, and then also some campaign tools like a virtual manual and that sort, all that stuff on their website. Progressive Summit Media Workshop and other guides you can find here. I am not as familiar with that, but that's something that was included. Media and publicity for green candidates, courtesy of the Green Party of California. And that's very good. That was, California was one of the powerhouse, it is one of the powerhouse green parties and very good media operations. And, you know, they have to compete with real media people out there. So this would be another good resource. More media resources. These are some old ones. Dare to Win by Philip Tajisha Nash of commondreams.org. And that's an older, it was 2006, but this was something that was kind of innovative at the time and still has a lot of good information about campaigning online, using the internet for political campaigns, winning campaigns online by Phil and Emmy Nash. Again, coming out years ago, but still very relevant today. And a few other things, the famous George Lakoff book, Don't Think of an Elephant, about messaging. Campaign Creator, which I admit I haven't looked at, but worth checking out. Toastmasters is really good for improving your communication skills, especially public speaking. If you like to, I just did use the word a lot. This will help you break those habits. Now it's easier if you're doing a campaign speech and you've got it, by the time you're well into your campaign, you're gonna be saying the same stuff over and over again, and you'll have it memorized. But it's helpful when speaking just off the cuff to be able to avoid extraneous words. It's not horrible to have them, but it can make a difference in how you're perceived, and it can help you get your message across a lot more concisely. Then there's a candidate handbook, Be the Media, which we had a media coordinator in my state that was really good with this, and he recommended this. Be the Media is how you can create your own media and be involved in media, like as a public TV person, or PATV type of thing, or community radio. Then oldies but goodies, Be the Media, winning campaigns online. Okay, that was a repeat. So as you can see, and this is the end of it. So as you can see, I had put this together and then kept adding things and then added some things for this. So there's a little bit of repetition, but a lot of the material, especially at the end here, is good. So again, you can write to media@gp.org, and I will send you this. And recommend people check it out. And again, we will probably have more webinars on this for the Coordinated Campaign Committee. So hopefully by that time we'll have even more up-to-date information. One thing is that marketing information and what's popular online, changes quite a bit. So you just want to remember to hit the staid, old, boring stuff, the usual stuff, and then kind of keep apprised of what may be a fad. And it may be a fad for the duration of your candidacy and disappear, but certainly doesn't hurt to make use of whatever platforms you have. I think that's it. Any further questions?
I don't see anybody raising their hand.
Okay.
And it's
Oh,
the end of the workshop anyway, so.
oh,
Um,
are they able to?
Holly, I think when you take down hopefully you'll see the chat. There's getting some comments about the presentation after you, yeah.
Oh, I'm looking to see. Oh, excellent presentation. I agree. Thank you. I was going to only read the good ones. Thank you so much, Warren, again, from California. That's good, because California does have.
Nick's raising his
Oh,
hand.
Nick is raising his hand. Go ahead, Nick. Nick. Oh, unmute. Oh, sorry. Got it.
Thank you for that. Couple of things now. I was just going to mention that, Holly, that when you're doing a screen share, you can't see the chat. Someone mentioned that in an earlier session. Also, just as an observation, I've known you a long time. Your presentation was tremendous.
Oh, thanks.
And doing it online, though I did notice, at times attempt to look at the camera because you were looking down the whole time reading. So if you go, like this, it connects with the people that are watching.
I could have had my phone up. You're absolutely right.
Right. And so that's great, because one of the presentations for being the delegate reporter, Michael talked about having a little stand. So be aware of that, and to turn your phone sideways. I don't. I have a laptop. So, and as you can see, I'm still messing around with the virtual thing in the background.
Yeah.
And there was one other thing. Oh, there was a comment, and just a comment to the comment. I've run numerous times, as you know, and at times the incumbent doesn't show up to a forum that's being held by the Haiku Community Association or whatever, because there's little benefit sometimes for the incumbent, unless they're unpopular, to come and give credence to candidates that's challenging them. And at times, since we're a one-party state, I run as a Green against a Democrat, Green against a Democrat, and the Democrat just, why show up? So anyway, that's for the state races. For the county races, those are nonpartisan. But again, brilliant presentation. Thank you, Holly.
Well, great. And I know a lot of people on this call actually are people who are really seasoned at campaigning. So, next time we do one of these, we can include more background, more people in these, because I think that's been, we've learned quite a bit. When we did the webinar, we had people who showed up that actually offered some good advice. And one other thing I'll mention, so I said media@gp.org. You can also go to the Coordinated Campaign Committee page and click on webinars, and that virtual campaign school has the Michael O'Neill's video presentation, which was quite good. And that goes into more technical geek stuff, but if you wanted to put together your own video outfit, that's an inexpensive way to do it.
Where was that, Holly, posted?
Oh, it's on the Coordinated Campaign Committee page. You go to gpus.org, not gp.org, but gpus.org.
Oh, looks like Mike typed it here.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, good. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so it's committees and then coordinated campaign. And then you'll see something that says webinars, and you click on that and you'll get all the webinars that they have, and then the virtual campaign school. And that video one was I hope it's there anyway. If not, that may be a webinar that we have soon, because that, especially today, is increasingly important. As you can see, I didn't follow many of the rules, but anyway. Oh, here's one more. I'm running for my first campaign this year, and several of the things there are going to help. Oh, good. I'm glad. Hopefully. Good. That's good to know. So, well, good luck to everybody who is running. How long does this run? 4:30, 5:30?
5:15, so we're 5 minutes over.
Oh, okay. Well, we can, you've got that address then. So if anybody has questions or wants a slide deck, they can write that address, and you'll get the slide deck.
You can save the chat on the bottom of the chat. There's three, on the far right, 3 dots. And if you click that, you can save it as a file, people who don't know.
Okay, yeah, he just did. As Mike Gams just posted the address as well. So, oh, I see. Save it as a file. Okay, wait, let me try this.
Right,
hang on.
that's saving the whole chat.
Oh, saving the whole chat. Oh, no, I think that'll save to the thing anyway. So, Anna, is this going to be save the chat?
Yeah, and I'm going to stop the recording right now.